Chapter 140, Sleeping Technique, Part 2-2. Translator, Strivon. When a male and a female locked gazes for a long while, but possessed neither physical desires nor shared an emotional connection, their actions can only be understood as an attempt to exert dominance over one another. Luo Nan certainly didn't think that deeply, but Bai Xinyan was able to grasp the subtle meanings underlying the situation. From her perspective, Luo Nan was far from being able to intimidate others with his current ability. She didn't truly feel that Luo Nan was trying to control her. The answer was obvious. This was just an emotional performance. In other words, childishness. It was indeed meaningless to stay on the same wavelength as a childish big boy. Bai Xinyan didn't want to force herself to continue. She simply reached out and held Luo Nan's head firmly. "The colors of your irises are really ugly." She let go of his head before Luo Nan could struggle and moved to a different side of the room. She completely ignored Luo Nan's expression as she pondered in her mind. The little fellow's hostility has grown stronger and stronger ever since the events at Frost River Reality. This change makes no sense. While Bai Xinyan mulled this over, Luo Nan pressed a hand to his ear and subconsciously walked 2 steps away. He likely received a message through the psychic wave network. Yuan was most likely the one to have contacted him during this time of day. A couple of seconds later, Bai Xinyan received a communications request. The request came from none other than Yuan. Yuan had initiated a 3-way communication link. Bai Xinyan wasn't a member of the society, but she had requested temporary use privileges in using the hexaware for the sake of convenience. Ouyang Chen was quite magnanimous when it came to promoting the results of his research. The matter was easily handled, and so Bai Xinyan could observe the daily life of the society's Xia City branch in close proximity and collect relevant intelligence with ease, to her delight. To have such a big-hearted boss and several colleagues below this boss, it must not have been easy for Sister He after she retired from the military. Bai Xinyan laughed and greeted her with a bit of pity. "Hello, Sister He. Have you finished serving those great envoys?" Yuan ignored Bai Xinyan's ridicule, or perhaps she didn't wish to talk about those people. She simply cut to the chase. "I would like to hear your opinion on the learning arrangements Mr. Luo made with the Jiaoguan." "I have no opinion. This is because your boss didn't bring up the matter with me at all. I don't know if he has a certain opinion about that Gym Master Xiu, or if he has a certain opinion of me." Such an open accusation left Luo Nan speechless. These were times when he couldn't keep on being stubborn. He could only comfort himself in learning to defy Bai Xinyan. Then he spoke a few sentences to describe the notable points of his trip to the Jiaoguan. Actually, there wasn't much he could say. Gym Master Xiu's intentions were very clear. He could teach Luo Nan, but the time needed to be arranged. All Gym Master Xiu requested was time. This went a bit against convention, but that was all. Yuan sank into deep thought. Then she asked Bai Xinyan, "Will it affect the treatment you're giving Mr. Luo?" "From what I can see now, no. Of course, if you don't mind, I can add another research task and see if there is any improvement in the altercation absorption efficiency rate under Gym Master Xiu's instruction." "Oh, right. What do you feel about Gym Master Xiu? Is he serious, cordial, sly, antisocial? Aren't you going to describe him to Secretary He?" Bai Xinyan's ability to use every second and every inch was second to none. Luo Nan rolled his eyes. He didn't want to respond. Luckily, Yuan forcefully shifted back to the topic at hand. It's good as long as it doesn't affect the treatment. For other items, there is still room for adjustment in Mr. Luo's schedule. Purely intellectual courses in general learning can be taught via the psychic wave network. It will be ideal if this could occur simultaneously with the health pod treatment. The training exercises in Frost River reality don't take too much time. The plan is feasible. However, all the brain burner courses should be postponed until later. If the mind is too strained, the treatment efficiency will certainly be affected. Common sense is absolutely crucial to keep in mind. The intensity can't be overwhelming. I will give the others a warning on the specifics. The two ladies weren't willing to shirk responsibility, so they took the task of drawing up the schedule upon themselves. This became the new topic of their discussion. Only on some details did they consult Luo Nan, the person involved, for his opinion. After the schedule was generally formed, Yuan contacted the society members involved in the schedule one by one in communications. Soon, an all-new schedule was made and completed. Luo Nan felt something when he saw the new daily schedule appear before his eyes. He felt like he was an outsider, as if he was on a completely different page than these two ladies. Luo Nan quickly suppressed this peculiar feeling of his and asked, "I'll take this schedule and get in contact with Gym Master Xiu tomorrow, then." Yuan grunted. It seemed as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she simply said, "Have him take a look. Any adjustments, because of issues, can only be done after you start trying out the schedule. Today, let us first do a test. A test to see the effects of network learning within the treatment pod." Bai Xinyan held Luo Nan's shoulder. "Yeah, did you hear her? You can take off your clothes now." Luo Nan took off his clothes and entered the pod with gritted teeth. Bai Xinyan was quite considerate with the time after the Frost River reality treatment. She gave the following hour over to Yuan. Today's general knowledge course was still ins and outs of the psychic wave network's world order. Luo Nan had long since put the immersion helmet on his head, but it had yet to turn on for the time being. He followed Yuan's instructions and entered the learning guide mode in the psychic wave network via the hexsphere. There was bound to be some unexpected things for Luo Nan. The first thing Luo Nan saw was the home page of the society, which was also the main interface of the game 10 Days in the Wilderness. In the past, only a few members of the society were able to personally witness the scene of the wilderness through practical courses. The scene appeared before his eyes just like this. The rusty earth appeared like ripples and ripples of frozen waves. A few Western-style bulletin boards were carried by these waves, and they arrived within reach. Looking at this scene made it seem as if one could enter the wilderness by simply taking one additional step. "Why aren't you giving it a shot?" A crystal-clear voice resonated by his ear. The sensation was far too realistic, so much so that Luo Nan turned his head by instinct. Then he saw Yuan. Currently, Yuan was still wearing a tailor-fit professional suit. The material was navy blue, and underneath it she was wearing something that one could never go wrong with: a white dress shirt. Her dress pants fit her slender legs, and altogether she appeared confident, crisp, and sharp. This was her usual style of attire. There weren't any useless decorations or accessories. Luo Nan saw this image quite often, but today it was a bit different. This was because there was clearly a dreamlike glow surrounding Yuan's body. The purpose of this glow was to call to his attention that what he saw wasn't a true form. The glowing outline contrasted with He Yuan's body like porcelain, contrasting with jade. But there was a powerful impact with this inhuman quality, and it made Luo Nan speechless for a time. He Yuan approached him exactly like this. She spoke coolly and calmly just like usual. Today's learning objective is the practical operation of the Hexria's simulator. We need to make use of our time. We need to make sure that these out-of-body experiences won't overly stimulate your soul's strength and cause unplanned growth. Chapter 141, Simulator Part 1-2. Translator Strivon. Luo Nan was more or less a bit stupefied when faced with He Yuan's new form. He only awoke from his reverie when He Yuan cast a piercing gaze over. I can. The Hexria was invented by Ouyang Chen. It was the terminal equipment for the psychic wave network and possessed a total of 6 layers of communications. A typical awakened can achieve extremely fast and convenient network functions through the first 3 layers, and these were more than enough for daily use. The simulator belonged to the 4th layer of communications. Luo Nan once heard Mr. Bai explain that this function was similar to the out-of-body state. One could realize an instantiation of one's self-logic upon the psychic wave network and similar virtual reality experiences. This was already quite high level. Many members of the society couldn't do it. Luo Nan was a mentally enhanced ability user. He had the ability to send his soul out of his body, so he was superior than most people in this area. Mr. Bai had long since judged Luo Nan capable of entering this layer. But Mr. Bai also said that Luo Nan absolutely must not use the simulator function if he had not resolved the issue regarding his body and soul imbalance. Otherwise, his soul's strength would likely continue to grow, giving his body even greater pressure. In response to Luo Nan's question, He Yuan said, "Yes, because the results from President Ouyang's Logic World experiment allowed substantial changes to arise within the simulator function. Right now, it's still in a debugging state. The soul strength consumption rate doubles when one enters this basic layer. As long as your control is enough, we can eject you before any positive gains appear. Time is of the essence. We can start now." Okay, Luo Nan simply replied. He Yuan did not immediately start practical training, but instead gave a refresher on the last class. "Last time, I taught you the concrete forms regarding extraordinary powers in the psychic wave network." "Yes, extraordinary powers. Eastern tradition calls it Kai. Some people in the West call it mana. Burners call it internal energy. The society's official name for it is psychic power. No matter the name, it is fundamentally the energy and information that an ability user utilizes to bestow order." Luo Nan quite liked the descriptor that was bestow order. His realizations from his cultivations to this day were concordant with it. The subject made him talk non-stop. Therefore, the Hexria invented by President Ouyang is also known as the psychic simulator under the society's definitions. The electronics built in aren't really complicated precision electronics, but the device can guide psychic power, form a special terminal structure, and realize analytic control over energy and information. He grew more excited the more he talked. From Luo Nan's perspective, the terminal structure of the Hexria was a sort of simple configuration. There was a huge difference between it and the external neuron, which was the deep C-type 4-dynamo core in terms of precision. It was even a bit inferior to the imitation chipset he had seen at Frost River reality. However, there was something absolutely amazing about this invention. It could make full use of the carrier that was the ability user. By guiding its relatively simple structure, it could display extremely remarkable utility. If a description had to be made, the dynamo core and the imitation chipset were approximately equivalent to automatic weapons. Astonishing results could be displayed in their corresponding areas just by knowing how to manipulate these devices. On the other hand, the Hexia was like an ancient legendary sword. If placed in the hands of a child, it might not even be able to slay a chicken. However, if placed in the hands of a peerless swordsman, it could wipe out 1,000 forces with ease using one horizontal slash. Well, this was not an exact description, of course. Luo Nan was still unable to truly probe out all the functions of the dynamo core, and he did not have an accurate understanding of the upper limits of the Hexia. However, this did nothing to stop him from feeling admiration toward President Ouyang Chen. This sort of simple and precise structural form inspired only astonishment and awe in Luo Nan, a beginner arduously researching the efficiencies of soul configurations. If his configuration was tempered to the degree that the Hexia was, his external neuron would not be crammed with his rapidly growing soul strength to the brink of explosion. Luo Nan thought about his helpless situation with the enormous brimming lake that was the hollow depository, and had the impulse to rush over to apprentice himself to President Ouyang Chen. Yuan was not surprised with Luo Nan's depth of understanding regarding the Hexia and the psychic wave network. She experienced Luo Nan's outstanding comprehension ability toward courses during her last lecture. Though this didn't involve political details, she just added, in the first 3 layers of communication modes, the Hexia simply needs to decode the information flow coming in. The simulator layer, on the other hand, involves the sharing of energy. That is, thousands upon thousands of people's psychic power are jointly used to support an enormous virtual world. The transmission of energy and information in this world is extremely efficient. Like last time when we faced, well, who was the fellow who controlled the human-faced arachnid? Luo Nan nearly blurted out the name, Mo Lun. This was back during the operation against Jack. Elder Mo Lun of the Bloodflame Order brought a human-faced arachnid over to hunt and feed, giving the human-faced arachnid and others a lot of trouble. In the end, Yuan borrowed Ouyang Chen's power through the psychic wave network to repel the human-faced arachnid. The scene was fresh in Luo Nan's memory. He couldn't refrain from asking, is anything possible as long as one enters the simulator layer? Theoretically, yes, but the burden is quite heavy. The required privileges are extremely high. Perhaps there will be improvements made in the future. This is because the integration of the logic world gave the psychic wave network a fundamental change. What we are going to do next is to conduct a comprehensive analysis of this place before the majority of people come in. Yuan's reminder made Luo Nan suddenly realize that although he was standing at the entrance to the wilderness, he didn't see anyone else at all. Are there normally a lot of people coming here? There is on average 800 people online at any point during the day. That's a lot. Just how many awakened are there in Xia City? I'm talking globally. Yuan added to her explanation. If one isn't a mentally enhanced ability user with the ability to send one's soul out of the body, the vast majority of people have to be at or above the architect level in order to enter this place and to access this plane. The ability to send one's soul out of the body is rarely seen in your typical awakened. Therefore, every person you make contact with here in normal times is a veteran. Luo Nan was a bit stunned. Then, isn't it a bit early for me to come here? Yuan didn't answer him. She just walked slowly, entering the wilderness from the border with a single step. Her glowing, translucent figure caused the dark red background to light up. Then she turned around to look at Luo Nan. The name of the society is the Wilderness Explorers Society. The wilderness is our main direction. Of course, the far more dangerous ocean is also included. President Ouyang used the interface of the 10 days in the wilderness game not just by random choice, but because it is an excellent place to learn basic tactics. Today, we will focus on you adapting to this place. If there aren't any abnormal reactions, Crag Burst will guide you in this place to learn about tactical commands over the next few days. He is also the only one of your course instructors who can enter the 4th communication layer of the hexsphere. The other courses will be interspersed as you progress. Luo Nan knew that the time to chat was over and nodded in agreement. One more thing. Yuan suddenly chuckled. Her smile came out of nowhere. It was bright and dazzling under the virtual rays of light. It made one feel dazed. Abruptly, her arms slashed across empty air, and a mirror appeared on the boundary line to the wilderness a second later. A mass of fuzzy, faint light shone in the mirror like drifting mist. At the center, one could faintly see the shape of a tetrahedron. This, Luo Nan suddenly realized something while looking into the mirror. Is this me? Chapter 141, Simulator Part 22. Translator Strivon. The feeling of novelty was missing when Luo Nan first entered the simulator layer of the psychic wave network. This was because the sensation was similar to using the immersion equipment of virtual reality. Luo Nan just took this as a virtual reality experience specific for ability users, but he had never expected that his form would look like this in here. It was hard for Luo Nan not to be embarrassed when he thought about how he talked to Yuan in this form just now. No wonder she laughed. Yuan's rarely seen smile flashed and disappeared like fireworks. Then, she returned to her normal calmness. Your view toward yourself lacks maturity. If you want to engage in normal movement here, then you first need to establish your own form. So I need to create a mold, like character customization in a game. It's self-cognition, self-portrait. The two communicated some concepts in an instant. Yuan was about to give a more detailed explanation, but she stopped before the words could leave her mouth. She only kept the mirror there. It's up to you to figure out how to establish your form. Luo Nan stood in front of the mirror in a daze. He earnestly thought of how to go about changing his form due to how serious Yuan was being. However, he couldn't think of any other ideas no matter how much pondered. A change appeared in the mirror the instant the thought stirred in his mind. Lines of a silhouette were drawn on the image within the mirror. The process was no different than his everyday sketches. Luo Nan wasn't good at self-portraits. He had mentioned this to Zai Junping before. Luo Nan wasn't being humble. This was because Luo Nan was never quite able to grasp his own individual characteristics in his drawings. All he could draw was something similar in form. But when compared to most people in this world, his skill in sculpting himself was quite decent. The blurry and faint body in the mirror soon turned into a simple humanoid image. Then the image was enriched and fine-tuned. After 30 seconds of shaping, the image became about 70% similar to Luo Nan himself. It was certainly possible to make it better with a bit more effort. Is this fine? Luo Nan raised his hand. The sensation was pretty much the same as his physical form as he turned his head and asked. Yuan looked at him for a while and lightly shook her head. Luo Nan asked in wonder, "What's wrong?" "This method is the easy way out." Yuan walked back over until she reached Luo Nan's side. In the simulator layer, our form should be the manifestation of our individual characteristics when it comes to the operational structure over energy and information. According to President Aoyang's explanations, it could be considered a view into one's self-logic. For example, Yuan raised her hand as she spoke. Her long, thin fingers spread a bit, indicating for Luo Nan to look. "My current form isn't what I want. The internal energy of the burner, its operation of energy and information, causes light and heat to appear on my foundation. So it is unavoidable for my form to glow. Anyone can see that I am a burner with a single glance." Luo Nan fell in a daze when staring at Yuan's jade-like fingers. Eventually, he understood. In other words, one's form in the simulator layer is also a certain objective reality. At the very least, it is a sort of projection. It can't just be anything. Indeed, Luo Nan now understood clearly, but he couldn't refrain from scratching his head when he saw his form in the mirror. "But I've still yet to be an awakened. Self-logic, and so on, I haven't established them yet." This reason Luo Nan found was so good that it stupefied Yuan for a moment. Yuan then nodded. "Indeed, this needs to be considered as well. Then let us first proceed with the next step and see what happens." And so she indicated Luo Nan to follow her and step through the boundary into the wilderness. Luo Nan followed with deep curiosity. He reached his hand out to touch the bulletin board within the gusts of sand. The thick and rough sensation was instantly fed back. "It's wooden." The boundary between the virtual and the real blurred away. Luo Nan turned his head. The so-called entrance had already disappeared. He just saw the boundless, rusty red dirt, and in front of the bulletin board, he saw the outline of a building appear. Now he had truly entered the simulator layer. Luo Nan didn't have the energy to be emotionally moved. Yuan's practical course didn't involve him looking at scenery. For the next 20 minutes, Yuan had him familiarize himself with the environment. The main activity point was a small town that was similar with the background of the 10 days in the wilderness game. In that game, this was the supply point for players. It was also the place where missions were issued. In the psychic wave network, this was more like a large saloon. People online will engage in communications and inquiries here. What do they talk about? Luo Nan had applied video game thinking toward this place, but when he heard Yuan's introduction, he suddenly realized that his thinking was childish. The veteran members, every single one of them, were brilliant, outstanding characters in the inner world. Each had ability, each had goals. None of them had the leisure to run in here and play games. "I've only been here once since joining the society. I haven't participated in the concrete details. However, I have heard President Aoyang say that most discussions revolve around topics of self-logic, energy structures, the interference between the mental and the material, and other similar fields." Luo Nan blinked. "They can also talk about this stuff offline. Nothing can compare to this place in terms of convenience. The psychic wave network is erected by thousands upon thousands of ability users. It's like a supercomputer. President Aoyang and others can utilize the resources within this place and render models that are hard to implement in reality. All right, the style of the scenery was quite good. The problem was that Luo Nan had never seen such a ramshackle saloon. Yuan led Luo Nan to the town's central block. It was empty with no one in sight. It was as if the entire town had been looted by a tornado. Most of the buildings had collapsed into ruin. Only a few buildings were basically intact. Practically each building is an independent zone. Inside a portion of them are items that have been ported from the game to provide people with amusement. However, most are experimental models, the crystallization of collections of several people's intelligence. What's the deal with it now? It has to do with the effects from the logic world. Yuan spoke softly. A great change occurred in the structural rules of the simulator layer when President Aoyang integrated the results of the logic world inside. Most experimental models haven't adapted to the environmental change and have been destroyed. Logic world. Luo Nan more or less understood the principles of erecting the logic world. It was a structure of deep interference between the mental and the material planes, and it was really quite unfriendly. However, this method of spatial rifting to construct a new world caused one to truly feel like they were staring up at a high mountain. Sister He, so you're saying that this place is equivalent to another logic world? Yuan shook her head. This isn't my area of expertise. Luo Nan twisted his head and looked all around, having not received an answer. Yet he was unable to easily clarify it. He thought for a bit and walked to the side of a ruined building. He lowered his head to size up the rubble and stone. Shaped like snowflakes, it's quite orderly. They looked like a chaotic mess of ruins when looked at from afar. But when looked at carefully, one would find that there were structural patterns within every piece of debris. Laws and rules could be found within every piece. It was practically impossible for this to happen in the real world. The difference between the natural and the artificial. Luo Nan reached out his hand to grab a piece of rubble. He wanted to research it in earnest for a moment, but his hand only raised up halfway before his hand felt light and the stone fell to the ground. Luo Nan was a bit stunned. The rubble didn't slip out from his fingers. It directly cut through the skin, flesh, and bones of his hand. It went through without hindrance at all, falling to the ground with a sound. Chapter 142, Interference Ability, Part 1-2. Translator, Strivon. Luo Nan reached out to grab the rubble again by instinct. The stone entered his hand once more. The tactile sensation, weight, and so on were still there. He really did pick up the stone. Right now he was crouching on the ground, and his back was facing Yuan. These actions of picking up and throwing were quite normal. Yuan's attention wasn't placed here. She used this period of time to continue introducing her knowledge about the simulator. President Aoyang built the psychic wave network, so this virtual world was bestowed with his basic order. However, President Aoyang doesn't have complete control over this world. Instead, collective researchers with their combined intelligence endlessly revise this world. This world contains each of their orders, changing them into a public order. Bloodrock Town is the most important hub in establishing order. Luo Nan's attention became a bit distracted by Yuan. He removed his gaze from the rubble and turned to ask, "Isn't it a hassle this way?" Actually, Luo Nan wanted to say something else. Why was President Aoyang giving away sole authority without rhyme or reason? He'll certainly be held back by the others, right? Yuan was about to respond when something to the side caught her eye. Luo Nan looked over as well, but all he saw was the largest public communications area in the town. It was a building similar to a tavern, and the wooden door swung open with a wham. Someone had walked out. There were other people in this town. The unknown person clearly heard the dialogue between Luo Nan and He Yuan, and simply said, "The energy of a single person can't possibly support the entire structure of a virtual world. Even if he could, who would come here if this place keeps closed rules of order?" It was a man around 40 years of age, the age which could be said to be one's prime. The man had a proper appearance and a high stature. He wore a tailored Western suit with tastefully chosen accessories. He just didn't fit in with the town environment. Actually, He Yuan didn't fit in as well. The two were dressed up like white-collar, senior-level workers of a large company, not explorers that wander the wilderness. Moreover, they clearly knew each other. The man greeted after interrupting, "I heard that the simulator underwent a revision, and I specifically asked President Aoyang for temporary privileges to come and take a look. I'm not disturbing you, am I?" He Yuan responded indifferently with, "Mr. Yuan," and didn't give him any more words. Mr. Yuan revealed a faint smile on his face. He walked over from the street, but he didn't go over to He Yuan. Instead, he walked over to Luo Nan's side. His tall figure and the squatting Luo Nan formed a striking difference in height. Before Luo Nan could stand up, Mr. Yuan said, "In today's era, no one can eat by themselves. Anyone who wants to form a monopoly will be abandoned by the others. It's like the rules formulated within public companies. Gains and profits need to reflect the interests of each shareholder. So I need to say that President Aoyang made an extremely wise decision." "The heck is this guy?" Luo Nan finally stood up. He really didn't like this man's attitude. Specifically, he was disgusted by large statistical organizations like Quantum Corporation. He detested all similar remarks. Moreover, this man clearly was rather arrogant in his evaluation toward Ouyang Chen. They were in the psychic wave network. Didn't this man have any basic respect for Ouyang Chen? Having reached this point in his thoughts, a light bulb suddenly lit up in Luo Nan's mind. He more or less guessed the identity of this middle-aged man. As expected, He Yuan introduced the man to Luo Nan. "Little Luo, this is Yuan Fei, Mr. Yuan, of the Society HQ's Incident Investigation Team." Little Luo. Luo Nan realized that his social status had been downgraded. There were no problems with He Yuan calling him this. As far as the current situation was concerned, it was even appropriate. He knew that there was some intention to protect him. But people's hearts were delicate and hard to understand. When the words entered his ear, he suddenly felt an ache in his heart. He didn't feel too good. Luo Nan was bewildered, unable to understand the matter in Yuan Fei's perspective. Anyway, it was quite a surprise for Luo Nan to meet such a fellow in the simulator layer. Yuan Fei sized Luo Nan up a few times. This strong attitude made the young Luo Nan quite uncomfortable, so Luo Nan stopped squatting and stood up. Yuan Fei's eyes clearly gleamed when he saw this. The boy was young and quite arrogant, yet he was able to enter the simulator layer. Had Xia City unearthed another gifted talent? Glatto! A sudden sound reverberated around the area. The sound was exceptionally clear within the quiet atmosphere. The three people's gazes roamed all over. They saw a stone tumbling down some rubble. Luo Nan stared stupefied at his own hand. Did the stone slip through his fingers? No. This time the sensation was much clearer than before. The stone had fallen down onto the palm of his newly solidified hand, and out from the back of his hand. He moved his fingers subconsciously and turned his hand back and forth in examination. At last, he was able to determine something. Though his hand appeared to be of substance, it had been formed like a congealment of mist. Its density was insufficient, to the extent that it lacked resistive force. The weight of a stone could only be held for a time. His hand would disperse with a mere distraction. So it was like this all along. Yuan Fei shook his head, faced He Yuan and said, "Miss He, after the logic world was integrated into the psychic wave network, the structure of the psychic wave network has grown more and more complicated. The technician maintenance strength needs to be increased. However, there's no need to be excessive through being overly enthusiastic. The way I see it, this kid is really not bad to able to use high-level applications of the psychic wave network at a young age. But to forcefully enter the fourth communication layer is meaningless." The words made Luo Nan very uncomfortable. "What do you mean by forcefully entering? It wasn't hard at all." Luo Nan was just about to speak when another mirror manifested out of thin air and dropped to the ground. It stood by his side, but the mirror was Yuan Fei's doing, not He Yuan's. "All right, little Luo, go mold your form a bit more. It's about to fall apart." Luo Nan turned to look and was quite shocked. Who knows when his face became bloated and swollen. His facial features were mangled. He looked ugly and ridiculous. Light fell from the sky the instant Yuan Fei spoke those words. Part of the light even shone through his body. He looked abnormal. There are no two ways about it. You're not interfering with the material plane sufficiently. This would have been fine if it was the old version of the psychic wave network. But the new version has greatly increased the role of interference ability. It's like the pressure deep underwater has been raised. If your structural strength is inadequate, the collapse of your form is inevitable. Yuan Fei put a hand in a pocket. It looked like he was sizing up a very interesting toy. He even reached out to gesture with his other hand around Luo Nan's body, and he turned to speak to He Yuan. "It looks like the new version has increased the threshold requirements for access. Things are going to be quite strenuous for people over here in Xia City. Miss He, can you propose to President Aoyang to release the technological safeguards over here and let the other branches share the pressure?" He Yuan brows furrowed a bit. The psychic wave network has been open source quite early on. Technological safeguards are all executed in Bloodrock Town. I'm talking about the infrastructure. Yuan Fei cast a glance at Luo Nan, his lips hooked into a grin. An upgrade is an upgrade. Those who are troubled are not limited to the kids of Xia City. Luo Nan looked in the mirror, and he found it harder and harder to shape himself into a human form. He tried to correct things back, but the sensation was completely different than before when he first entered the wilderness. He felt a clear sense of stagnation. When his telepathic thoughts cut through, it was like colliding into glue. Control became extremely strenuous. The more he tried to exert control, the more severe the dispersive state of his body's structure became. In the end, his body completely crumbled and dispersed into a mass of fog. It was impossible for him to return to his original state. Luo Nan looked at the ridiculous mass of fog in the mirror. He really couldn't laugh. Chapter 142, Interference Ability, Part 2-2. Translator, Strivon. Naturally, it was impossible to proceed with the practical training within the simulator. After dealing with Yuan Fei in a simple manner, He Yuan led Luo Nan out of the psychic wave network to go back to the plane of reality. Luo Nan opened his eyes, but all he saw was a sheet of darkness. An enclosed helmet, which had underwent special modifications, was covering his head. The immersion boot-up hadn't started yet. Luo Nan just gazed into the darkness as emotions flowed around in his mind. Yuan Fei had come from HQ as part of the incident investigation team. He came to Xia City without understanding the situation around Luo Nan, and saw Luo Nan enter the fourth communication layer for a hands-on attempt at the simulator. Yuan Fei felt that failure was normal for Luo Nan. Success would have been abnormal. He merely chuckled at the matter with zero concern. But Luo Nan was well aware of the imbalance between his own body and soul. He had enough of the stress and pain from the uncontrollable growth of his soul's strength. The sudden issue with his lack of interference ability was quite a contradicting phenomenon. It was so contradicting that anyone who knew his situation would be baffled for a time. He was unable to ponder for too long on this matter, for Bai Xinyan spoke with an exceptionally gentle voice. How did the out-of-body state feel within the psychic wave network? Luo Nan remained frustrated with his interference ability issue. He wasn't in the mood to answer Bai Xinyan, and he ignored the key elements in her words. Bai Xinyan just took his actions to be a silent agreement. She let out something like a laugh and a sigh. My silly old man seems to be quite enlightened, but truthfully, he's old-fashioned. He only believed that you had the ability of soul attachment. But now, the past 2 days have caused his face to become swollen from all the shame. He doesn't dare to show himself. Luo Nan only realized now what Bai Xinyan was saying. So it turned out that the misunderstanding regarding his out-of-body ability being a soul attachment ability was corrected. Indeed, Mr. Bai didn't show his face these days. From what Yuan was saying, it seemed that Mr. Bai was asked to teach Luo Nan, but had declined. Everyone knew quite well that his reasons didn't have much to do with Luo Nan. The element of Luo Nan only accounted for a small percentage of his decision. Luo Nan was disinclined to get involved in the dispute between the father and daughter pair. In any case, seeing how such an unforgiving woman would treat her good-natured old man raised Luo Nan's mental vigilance. Luo Nan's moment of silence lasted too long, leading Bai Xinyan to misunderstand his thoughts. You're not the only kid who gives half-truths, who keeps cards hidden in his hand. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just that you're a bit reckless from a doctor's perspective. Hello, Sister He. I was just talking with your boss. Though, Yuan's call was only for Bai Xinyan. Bai Xinyan uttered a questioning tone and sunk into silence. Several seconds passed, and the enclosed helmet lit up without warning. The guide process, specifically targeting ability users, had begun. Bai Xinyan's last sentence came cutting in. Tonight's homework has begun. I hope you don't go goofing off. Hey. Luo Nan didn't want to speak with Bai Xinyan before, but now he couldn't help opening his mouth. Even an idiot would know that the topic Yuan and Bai Xinyan were discussing was Luo Nan's insufficient interference ability. He was the person in question. Why the heck did they isolate him from the discussion? He felt like he was in the hospital and that he was just like a patient diagnosed with a terminal illness. The world knew he was done for, save himself. Hold on. The content of the pessimistic dialogue between the two last time, was it about this? Luo Nan forgot to accept the guiding process for a time. He remained in a daze. The protection of his external neuron and the buffer of the hollow depository were not enough to stop his chaotic thoughts and emotions during times like these. Luo Nan was completely out of it during his second day at school. The symptom of a lowered interference ability and its corresponding ominous signs had disturbed his mind from morning to night. As far as he was aware, Yuan and Bai Xinyan had engaged in a long discussion after the matter was discovered, but they never came to a definitive answer. They were going to make another major overhaul to Luo Nan's daily schedule, which had underwent a revision already. Luo Nan was left waiting for news until the new revision could be completed. The greater part of the day passed by in a blur, and Luo Nan had yet to receive his new daily schedule. Halfway through the afternoon, the time for the school society activities began. The other students got up in a hurry, and this included Zai Junping, who stuck by Luo Nan's side for 2 days straight. Zai Junping had a meeting to run in the student council. As for Luo Nan, he was the only living member of the order club. He wasn't in the mood, and there weren't any activities for him to do. Luo Nan was really in a bad mood. He came back to the tree house of the withered tree sandbar and sat in the resting room. He looked at the faint lighting in a daze. In the beginning, he carefully mulled over the issue with his interference ability, but his train of thought rammed against knowledge barriers, one after another, to the point of bleeding from his head. He would always encounter special cases involving formatting theory. He wanted to ask someone with a better understanding, but there was no one who could help him. In the end, his ruminations gave him a more terrible mood. He did some self-analysis in his helpless situation. He tried to interpret his negative emotions. Yuan had mentioned that normally there were only around 800 people online globally in the simulator at any given time. Luo Nan had felt a bit nervous, yet he also felt a bit of superiority. However, this sense of superiority was nipped in the bud. There weren't any other emotions that could fill the gap, and the empty sense of loss had naturally begun to breed. This was not just due to his change in status. It involved a more fundamental problem. The issue that popped up a few days ago had appeared suddenly, but had yet to be resolved. It remained this way up until tonight, like an endless shadow noiselessly creeping upon him. Luo Nan was alone within the shadows with nothing to support him. There were only his numerous and chaotic emotions entwining his mind, layer upon layer. They pushed him to ask himself, did his grandfather's formatting theory truly possess flaws that were near irresolvable? For instance, the uncontrollable growth of soul strength. In another instance, the lack of interference ability in the material plane. Were there other flaws besides these? Was there an end to them? Luo Nan leaned against the inner wall of the tree hollow. It seemed that all his energy had been devoured bit by this cruel problem, while time passed unknowingly in his days. This lasted until he felt a faint vibration within his ear. Someone was contacting him through the hexear. Luo Nan was a bit surprised when he saw the contact name. "Hello, Boss Luo. Is now a good time?" Luo Nan rushed out from the tree house, made his way through the underwater passageway and high-speed elevator, and arrived at the main entrance of Gear. Not long after Luo Nan got there, a 30-year-old young man appeared from a footpath on the outside of the building. It was now late autumn. The jungle wetland was densely woven with vegetation, blocking the sun early in the day. It was a lot duskier than normal. The young man plodded his way over, walking rather wearily. He made his way to the front of the Gear building and under its lights. His lips split into a grin, and beads of sweat could be seen on his chubby face. Boss Luo, it wasn't easy to find you here. This place is quite nice. Mr. Papercut, Luo Nan walked down the stairs and welcomed him. Chapter 143, Invisible Barrier, Part 1-2. Translator, Strivon. This was none other than the mentally enhanced ability user who Luo Nan fought alongside with during the night at Frost River Reality. It was Papercut. Frankly speaking, this old chap's external appearance was really too ordinary. Luo Nan nearly didn't recognize him when seeing him again at this moment. Luckily, Luo Nan still remembered this awakened with his slightly chubby body and his friendly smile to all, even if most of the time Luo Nan didn't receive this smile. Papercut's opinion of Luo Nan was mainly a reflection of the harmfulness of Luo Nan's immature behavior toward the team. However, various facts were later revealed that proved Luo Nan's behavior to be correct. And so, there was no longer a need for him to continue holding this opinion. You can just call me Papercut. Adding a Mr. to my nickname feels weird. Papercut's lips split into their habitual grin. Then don't call me Boss Luo. Boss Luo is your nickname tilde. Papercut's amiable way of talking was really contagious. I know that you have many nicknames. In any case, the first nickname lasts the longest. Everything follows the path of least resistance. Luo Nan was a bit sorrowful, but Papercut waved his hand before Luo Nan could say anything. Well, let's not get entangled in these details. Today, I have come to teach you. My apologies for the short notice. Something came up, so I pushed up the time. Luo Nan responded courteously. It is I who is troubling you. He beckoned Papercut to come inside as he spoke. Papercut was one of Luo Nan's teachers in general knowledge and training. He was responsible for teaching soul strength activation techniques, which is a practical course. When talking about the course, Papercut had to emphasize, usually this course is taught near the end. The reason why it was pushed forward must be because of my special circumstances, my low interference ability. We're going to do an on-the-spot test right now to further verify my situation, are we? Papercut was a bit stunned. He turned over to face Luo Nan, and he had a bit of a helpless gaze. Boss Luo, you're not that old, but you read into things so much. Luo Nan blinked. Aren't I right? And you're right. It wasn't surprising at all for Luo Nan to be reading into things. His old daily schedule had a summary of what this course was about. This course was clearly a practical course, involving the mental interfering with the material. The truth was as clear as day with the appearance of the issue with his interference ability, and the course being deliberately pushed forward. Was this a re-examination of his so-called terminal illness? Although things were like this, Papercut's course itself was still quite meaningful. Papercut's nickname was a reflection of his expertise in puppetry. He used special techniques to cut out paper tools to perform a variety of functions under the drive of his soul's strength. Within Gear's Room 3 stories above the earth, Papercut showed one of his techniques to Luo Nan. Papercut manipulated a tiny paper man to perform a comical mime skit. Then he manipulated the paper man to perform a set of military fighting moves. The motions were agile, vivid, and lifelike. It was as if the paper man was truly alive. The small paper man also possessed considerable strength. The teacups on the table were kicked all over the place. In the end, the paper man began to practice weightlifting. It swung the teacup in a way that made it look like a street performer. Luo Nan had been in an agitated mood, but he couldn't refrain from laughing when he saw the miniature paper man's hard performance. His mood had unconsciously taken a turn for the better. This is the most elementary application. Then later, mentally enhanced ability users are split into the activation class and the control class. The activation class primarily relies on imitating spirituality, while the control class primarily relies on precise manipulation. I'm an activation class. We are more laid back, and we predominantly do auxiliary work. I looked at your profile. You are a precision-focused, mentally enhanced, and your pure observation abilities are quite unruly. It is very likely that you will show some talent in precise manipulation. Papercut began by painting Luo Nan a rosy future. The society has combat robots specifically made by the control class. In fact, every control class should be able to excel in multiple fields. They can be amazing engineers, fighters, restorers. They are strong and safe. Luo Nan's eyes turned into thin little slits as he smiled and laughed. The first thing he had to do was meet the basic requirements for interference ability. Everything Papercut was saying was meaningless if it was impossible for his soul's strength to effectively interfere with the material plane. When restoration was mentioned, Luo Nan suddenly recalled the Tai Chi ball back at Divine Yu Gym. Its core component seemed to be precision machinery. He heard from Zhu Lei that the device hadn't been fixed yet. It remained in the Jiaogyuan. Luo Nan still needed to handle this matter properly. The repair engineers of the society had to be much better than those in the outside world. After a moment's distraction, Luo Nan recollected his thoughts. He focused on listening to Papercut's lecture with full devotion. Whether today was about training and learning or a re-examination of symptoms, Papercut only taught elementary subjects. He taught the basic techniques of using soul strength to affect material objects. Papercut had selected a special sort of paper talismans as training materials. Apparently, they came from a different psychic of the society, Mr. Gao, who Luo Nan hadn't met before. They were made from the starch of a specially bred mahogany and bamboo. The ratio was chosen with utter precision, resulting in the best-suited material for coalescing with soul strength. Papercut was someone who possessed a meticulous, yet patient nature. He broke down each step the moment he started working and manipulating the talismans. He explained the few specific points on the talisman that need to be infused with soul strength with absolute clarity. Everything was clear from theory to practice. Papercut had prepared the course so comprehensively that the difficulty wasn't that high. However, reality moved in a different direction. It simply went down the most pessimistic of estimations. Luo Nan's learning progress wasn't going well. It was already 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Under the lighting of the tea room, little Luo and Papercut held their breaths with steady concentration as they stared intently at the several crude paper men atop the table. These little things had just been cut out, and they swayed as they stood up. It was hard for them to walk. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, then dropping dead never to get up. Gosh darn it! Luo Nan slammed the table with his hands, and the resulting breeze lifted the paper men up. With the help of the breath of a long sigh, these little things floated and drifted under the table. These series of actions happened much more swiftly than the great difficult progress Luo Nan was making just now. Luo Nan knew of his failures, and he hurriedly said, "Sorry." He got up to collect the paper men, but Papercut stopped him with a hand. With an effort of will, a small paper man came to life at once some 5 meters away. It was like a brutish monkey. It skipped as it bounced, and it climbed the leg of the table. It made it to the top of the table in 5 movements. Luo Nan grew more embarrassed when he compared himself to Papercut. He gave a bitter laugh, sat back in the chair, and stared up in a daze. It doesn't make sense. Papercut scratched his head without end, but he wasn't able to get to the bottom of things. However, his patience had yet to be exhausted. He pulled Luo Nan and said, "How about we theorize some more and start from the beginning?" Luo Nan had no reason to give up when he had this sort of teacher. He pumped his spirits up, grabbed the paper man atop the table, and tapped various points on the paper man's body from the head to the body. There are 4 soul strength infusion points in total. They are connected by a sum of 6 foundational lines, upon which basic control is realized. Luo Nan hesitated when he reached this point. Then he said, "This is actually a sort of irregularly deformed pyramid. It is a structure that transforms the operation of energy and information. The paper man is just a medium. The pyramid structure is what supports it. Did you choose to start with this structure because it is kind of like my format pyramid?" Papercut was finally defeated upon hearing these words. He rubbed his forehead, feeling that his head was about to explode. "You say these things faster than I can explain them. What you say is correct, but is there a problem with this?" Chapter 143, Invisible Barrier, Part 2-2. Translator, Strivon. Luo Nan calmed down and fiddled with the small paper man with his fingers. Then he tossed it onto the table several seconds later. It is because the pyramid structure needs a certain tensile strength in order to work. If the strength you can bestow is equivalent to a steel structure, the most I can do are cobwebs. Strength, true, it's about the strength. Papercut felt helpless. He obviously knew that the crux of the issue was in the structural strength. The root of the problem was still Luo Nan's inadequate mental interference ability towards the physical plane. But interfering with the material plane was just skimming the surface for a mentally enhanced ability user. Luo Nan's mental senses had reached near perfection. Transitioning into an out-of-body state was routine for Luo Nan. He was a mentally enhanced ability user who had already reached B rank in mental cultivation. Yet Luo Nan couldn't do the most basic thing of all: telekinesis. What the heck was up with this? Who could answer this for Luo Nan? Ultimately, this question had no answer. Luo Nan was unable to get an answer from Papercut. Soon, night fell and he returned to the hospital for treatment. Bai Xinyan, who long since knew of his problems, avoided mentioning the topic completely. She did not give Luo Nan any reference information at all. Luo Nan wanted to ask Yuan some more about his situation, but he put these intentions to rest after a moment's thought. This issue with his mental plane largely had to do with self-awareness. If he couldn't clear up this matter on his own and relied on others, his situation would become even more hopeless. It was unavoidable for Luo Nan's terrible situation to affect his mood. The following exercises at Frost River Waterway were simply catastrophic. His performance was extremely bad. The amount of time he could endure was much less than in the morning, and it was a straight 20% drop from last night. Luo Nan looked at his performance results and geared up for another run. However, Bai Xinyan showed no expression whatsoever at his results. She let Luo Nan steadily conclude his session within the treatment pod. "You also need to learn something new tonight, so you'd best take a nap and relax. Oh right, don't be late." Bai Xinyan waved her hand as she created medical records, dismissing Luo Nan. In the past, Luo Nan would have likely been rejoicing, But after thinking it over more thoroughly, wasn't this attitude too happy-go-lucky? Was anything fine if a person was going to die anyway? Luo Nan thought of how he had eavesdropped on Bai Xinyan and Yuan's conversation 2 days ago, and his mood turned even worse. He really wanted to crack open Bai Xinyan's skull to see just what her perspective was on his situation. Or maybe he should listen in on their conversation once more. The problem was, how could such an opportunity to eavesdrop come about daily? Luo Nan left Renai Hospital in a storm of messy emotions. Tonight was already booked. He was to go to Boshan Building and learn breathing techniques from Gym Master Xiu. Last time Luo Nan had the flying car Phantom take him to the Yuan. He already returned the flying car to Zai Junping. Today, he sat in the low-altitude public transport. He made his way over to the River Wu district under the curtain of the night. The first thing Luo Nan did upon sitting in the vehicle was give his aunt a call. He notified her that he was going to spend the night at the Yuan. Actually, he had relied greatly on Zhu Lei in confirming with his aunt that he could stay out all night. But he was very familiar with his aunt's temperament. Though she had already approved of his schedule, Luo Nan still needed to give his aunt a call to ease her worries. If things were to go misses Luo Shuking's way, Luo Nan's first day of formal study would have misses. Luo Shuking come personally to the Yuan and greet Gym Master Xiu. By the time Luo Nan finished the call, Luo Nan was already halfway to the Yuan. At this time, the public transport vehicle wasn't as crowded as it was in the day. A few 10 or so people were on it. They were all either sleepy or looking down at their wristbands playing games or the like. Luo Nan sat at the back. His head was also down as he fiddled around. However, he was different from the others. He was fiddling not with an electronic device, but with a thin piece of yellowish-green paper. This was a special paper talisman given to him by Papercut. It was made personally by Mr. Gao. The material it was made from was quite special, as it was fairly suitable for channeling energy and information. It could easily deal with an enemy in the hands of a real expert. It was a bit luxurious for Luo Nan to use it for training. But if he wanted to train to get a true feel for it, it was absolutely fine. Luo Nan followed the techniques Papercut passed on to him, slowly working with the paper, ripping the paper into a paper man the size of a palm. The supporting incorporeal pyramid structure was then wholly formed. At the same time, Luo Nan's overflowing soul strength poured down to completely drown the paper man. The details were exquisite and meticulous. The grains of the paper, the roughness of the ripped edges, the vertical and horizontal folds. No detail could escape him. But under the effect of his soul's strength, the paper man could only roll over once within the palm of his hand in a half-dead, half-alive manner. It moved once, but never moved again. Luo Nan's soul's strength, which was crushing his own physical body, seemed to have no practical effect on the paper man. It's still like this, why? Back in Frost River reality, he had given Zhu Weilan and the Special Forces a reinforcing buff without any problems. He had real, concrete results when controlling the Wraith sign, influencing cat eyes, and unleashing mental attacks. But why couldn't he affect material objects? Luo Nan looked outside the window at the bright lights of the city. The scene looked like a fluttering cloth. It was desolate, and it was hard to see substance. Luo Nan's mind naturally reached out to cross the depth of the void. His mind flowed within the sea of city lights, and his sensations became more real. Within his senses and clairvoyance, the myriad of living beings was like a convergence of stars. It was akin to the winding Milky Way, with marvelous layers divided within. The Star River was majestic and hazy, like a grand world, gorgeous and magnificent. But such a vast Star River frame couldn't stimulate even a bit of an ocean's spray when cast upon the small paper man. The tensile strength of the pyramid structure was still like cobwebs. Things were so bad that Luo Nan couldn't even feel a connection between the pyramid structure and the Star River frame. There was an invisible, glacial barrier that blocked his consciousness from material objects. It made his consciousness infinitely close to, but unable to truly fuse with a material object. The situation was comparable to the divide between dreams and reality. Was this power just a fabrication? Was it like the crazed ravings of his grandfather? Did they only exist on an imaginary level? No, this made no sense. Luo Nan's beam of consciousness cut through the Star River, his senses covering a radius exceeding 2 kilometers. Within the metropolis, there were normal people, the awakened, oblatum knights, crows, and darksider life forms. They existed as additional fulcrums for him. They were real and true, and they gave him feedback at all times. How could such perceptions be an illusion? Luo Nan was in a hazy trance when he arrived at the Divine Yu Gym in Boshan Building. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening. The students of the Jiaoguan had all gone home. Only Zhu Lei remained. He had come out to welcome Luo Nan. "Nanster, the gym master is waiting for you inside." Luo Nan stifled his chaotic thoughts and emotions and spoke with a bit of embarrassment. "I'm late." "No way, the Jiaoguan isn't taking on new business, so we finished at 8 o'clock. You've actually come early, all things considered. What is important to remember is that learning something new will require a bit of time. Relax. I'll back you up tonight." Zhu Lei pulled Luo Nan inside. The lights were off for both the front courtyard and the middle courtyard of the Jiaoguan at this time. The late autumn night made walking through the winding corridor feel distinctly desolate and cold. Luckily, Zhu Lei had a loud voice, diluting this feeling quite a bit. Luo Nan asked curiously, "Are you staying overnight at the Jiaoguan too?" "Of course, I've always been the gym master's assistant, and his interpreter." In Luo Nan's days, he and Zhu Lei had already reached the back courtyard. The humanoid stone lanterns illuminated the entrance to the courtyard, dividing light and shadow, making the place look like an exquisite oil painting. Zhu Shenyu wasn't in this painting. Chapter 144, Power of the Mountains and Rivers, Part 1-2. Translator, Strivon. Luo Nan and Zhu Lei walked into the room. None of the lights were on. The lights outside only illuminated the entrance. Most of the place was pervaded with shadow. Nothing could be seen clearly. Zhu Lei looked all around to find the gym master, while Luo Nan relied on his advantage with mental senses and locked onto Zhu Shenyu's location a step before Zhu Lei. Zhu Shenyu was sitting atop the cork flooring. He leaned against the wall on one side of the corridor. His left leg was bent, while his right leg was straight. He just sat as he pleased. Not too far away from Zhu Shenyu was the Tai Kai ball. It was indiscernible if the environment embellished the scene, but right now Zhu Shenyu was silent to the point of gloom. He showed no response to the two young men coming in. "Gym Master, Luo Nan is here." Zhu Shenyu finally saw where Gym Master Xiu was at and walked over to notify him with a soft voice. Zhu Shenyu grunted and said, "Then let's begin." The simple and straightforward attitude was a bit of a shock to Luo Nan and Zhu Lei. Xiu Shenyu disregarded the thoughts of the two youngsters, stood up from the floor, and walked to Luo Nan's side. Xiu Shenyu had a tall, thin figure. He was a full head taller than Luo Nan, who had not completely grown yet. He gave off quite the pressure when standing. The time I requested of you is from 11 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning, for a total of 6 hours. Having 6 hours of time is sufficient for the first stage of learning in an ideal situation. Tonight, you have come early for the sake of learning basic techniques, performing a few tests, and understanding the details. Luo Nan obediently agreed, though it was quite strange for Gym Master Xiu to skip the pleasantries and dive straight into the course of action. Gym Master Xiu spoke with a high level of clarity. Luo Nan did not know what Zhu Lei meant by his being the Gym Master's interpreter. Luo Nan immediately obeyed Xiu Shenyu's requests. He lay flat on a sleeping mat that was already prepared. Zhu Lei lit a pot of incense in a very exaggerated manner, saying that it would help him to relax. The lighting was dim. The fragrance rose in spirals. It truly was not difficult to relax in this kind of environment. Luo Nan closed his eyes and slowly adjusted his breathing. Soon, he entered a calm state. Then Xiu Shenyu suddenly asked him, "Have you learned other breathing techniques in the past?" Yes." The tiny chanting and breathing technique Luo Nan practiced was largely useful for visualization. However, he had started off by practicing breathing, and a few weeks earlier, he witnessed an excellent demonstration from the unfathomable little girl Rui Wen. From her, he comprehended the tempo of soul breathing. Soul breathing should count as a breathing technique. Luo Nan believed that he had some experience. Xiu Shenyu continued inquiring, "Have you entered a meditative state before? Are you referring to a still state of mind, a fixed mental space?" "I have." Zhu Lei was quite delighted to the side. "This is good. You already have an excellent foundation. You would certainly make rapid progress." Xiu Shenyu gave Zhu Lei a glance, but refrained from saying anything. He simply let Luo Nan continue relaxing. At the same time, he began to tell him some essentials in calibrating one's breathing. He spoke generally at first, but due to the atmosphere they were in, Luo Nan subconsciously tried to follow the methods Xiu Shenyu talked about. Xiu Shenyu had an accurate grasp of Luo Nan's state. He suddenly changed his manner of speaking. He spoke more concisely, directly touching upon the differences that appeared in Luo Nan's testing process. He also added corrections. Sometimes he reached out with his hand to press against Luo Nan's body. He wanted Luo Nan to focus his breathing and mind on these areas. At first, Luo Nan disliked the feeling of having someone be so concentrated on his breathing. As Luo Nan controlled his breathing, he spared some attention to receive guidance. His mind was stretched taut. He could not be described as relaxed in any way. But Luo Nan ultimately had a foundation. Soon he discovered that they held several of the same understandings with regard to the essentials Xiu Shenyu was teaching him. Luo Nan's insight on some key details grew deeper, and consequently his breathing control became steadier. Furthermore, Xiu Shenyu's guidance did not involve harsh criticisms on the strict observance of the little details. He was like a faint guiding light that led the way forward, ensuring that Luo Nan never got lost. Luo Nan preferred to do things this way. Not a lot of time passed before Luo Nan adapted to Xiu Shenyu's teaching style. His mind soon settling down, Luo Nan controlled the intensity of his breathing, causing him to faintly feel something between his mouth and nose. The mind first existed in the mouth and nose, then the throat, chest, stomach, tailbone, and so on. This visualization also went in the reverse. It changed back and forth. Ultimately, it allowed for an uninterrupted breathing. Direction and location were indiscernible, as breath gradually enveloped his entire body. This wonderful feeling made the body feel like it was a bit hot, as if the body was wrapped in warm mist. It was akin to being in a steam sauna, but it did not feel as stuffy. It was rather penetrating. In the end, all of Luo Nan's energy was focused on the changes of feeling. Xiu Shenyu's low voice was naturally blocked off, and eventually even Luo Nan's consciousness of his body was blurred. It was as if his entire person had transformed into a cloud of mist, drifting in nothingness. The mist swelled and shrank, revealing the difference between the internal and the external. To sum it up, this was a sort of singular tempo. Yes, it was a bit like what Yuan could do, the breath resonance that was at the peak of wonders. The fusion of body and soul. With this thought, it was as if Luo Nan had awakened from a dream. He opened his eyes wide in understanding. Zhu Lei looked at his wristband in accordance to Xiu Shenyu's directions and confirmed the time. 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Zhu Lei laughed. You've spent a total of 320 seconds lying down until now. Luo Nan was stunned. That short. He thought that time had passed quickly. He thought that at least 2 hours had passed. He never expected that only a small amount of time had gone by. If he were to calculate the time when his mind was completely entranced, it probably would not even reach a minute. Xiu Shenyu glanced at Zhu Lei's wristband. Time in meditative state, 7 seconds. 7 seconds. The soul gallops across a world. The mind shines at 8 extremes. 7 seconds is good, it's not short. Luo Nan could not understand him at all. It was now time for Zhu Lei, the interpreter, to show off his skills. He spoke with praise. Sure enough, you do have a foundation. The meditative state you just entered is actually a process of self-examination of the body. It's like when a machine boots up and data is read and loaded into it. The faster your brain, the higher the efficiency. 7 seconds of introspection and achieving deep stillness is really amazing. Gym Master Xiu made no comment towards Zhu Lei's words. He just said, nothingness cannot be relied upon. Fullness cannot last long. Remember that breathing tempo. We will proceed with the next step. It was really hard to understand, but it truly seemed quite amazing. Luo Nan inevitably felt a different sort of confidence towards Xiu Shenyu's teachings. He recalled the feeling he had experienced just then and solemnly nodded. 2 minutes later, Luo Nan followed Xiu Shenyu's guidance and re-entered the marvelous state of body into nothingness. His body was like a cloud of mist, and warm heat continued to accumulate. Then he achieved the correct tempo where the mist swelled and shrank, and subsequently the heat was no longer static, now flowing endlessly. At first, Luo Nan's experience was a blur, but after becoming familiar with it, his senses grew more acute. Slowly, he observed some substantial meaning from the nothingness of the mist. Xiu Shenyu theorized that entering the meditative state was only the initial step in understanding. Cultivation required one to discard pre-established ideas about the body and mold the feeling of the still state of mind anew. This did not mean that Xiu Shenyu wanted people to let their imaginations run wild. What was real was still real. Breath was still breath. What was sought was the whole potential. Luo Nan was familiar with these methods. Was this not the same method as his speed sketches? The importance was not in the appearance and details, but in the grace and finesse of the method. However, Zhu Shenyu gave him a clear-cut image. The body is like the mass of a mountain range. The breath is like the length of flowing water. Chapter 144, Power of the Mountains and Rivers, Part 2-2. Translator, Strivon. The body was a mountain range with dense vegetation and thick soil. It can bear the rays of the sun and the rain of the clouds. It can resist storms and thunder. Breath was flowing water. It twisted and turned, amassing the beautiful soul of the mountain range, giving life to all living things. Here, the body was the foundation. It was the utmost, the decisive material structure. It was akin to a mountain range. There existed highs and lows, up and downs. Vital energy was the function decided by the body's foundation. It was like the power of flowing water. It followed the form of the mountain as it flowed down, and warmth and coldness, yin and yang, can be seen. The two conformed to each other, and nuances gradually grew clearer as the still state of mind intensified and the real and the virtual were manifested and discerned. There truly seemed to be a painting of mountains and rivers being unfurled before Luo Nan's eyes. Within the rolling mountains, clear rivers snaked around as they followed the path of potential. In some places, the waters remained in place. In some places, they turned. In some places, they split. The waters diverged completely in different places. Having these differences allowed the sense of substance to become clearer. Gradually, there were some places where the flow of water accumulated into something like a deep lake, a dark whirlpool. These were meridian points, and Zhu Shenyu wanted him to pay special attention to them. These nourished and grew the soul. These were fields of blessing. Luo Nan's consciousness gradually confirmed their locations and contracted them with his pre-established concepts of the body. Top of the head, the chest, the lower abdomen, and even the palms of the hands, the soles of the feet. There seemed to be a resonance among these meridian points, and they surged with dark life. Waves cut across, and the feeling of mist-like nothingness gradually retreated. Luo Nan's perception toward his body was expressed anew, but this time it was with a completely new understanding than before. It was like the ancient philosophical proposition, the mountain is seen as a mountain, water is seen as water. The mountain is seen as not a mountain, water is seen as not water. The mountain is still a mountain, water is still water. Luo Nan felt stupid when he heard Zhu Shenyu talk about these things, but when he truly experienced it himself, he felt he understood things quite clearly. However, Zhu Shenyu was only talking about the first step. He had yet to discuss what they would do next. Luo Nan's focus lightened a bit, his thoughts wandering. He originally wanted to exit the still state of mind and ask Zhu Shenyu the know-hows for the next step, but the resonance among his meridian points made him recall Rui Wen's marvelous technique of body and soul merging. But after carefully comparing the experiences, Luo Nan ultimately found that they were different. Luo Nan was far from reaching Rui Wen's ability to merge body and soul as one. The resonance in his body only occurred between a few meridian points. Each meridian point was a terminal point with lines connecting them, forming a fuzzy structure. The structure was a bit chaotic and complex. It was also somewhat familiar. If slight adjustments were made, the feeling Luo Nan perceived within his body was still quite unfocused. Luo Nan subconsciously viewed his body as a revisable painting. The terminal points were moved, and the connecting lines were merged. After a few adjustments, the fuzzy and chaotic structure became orderly. The structure became a central axis in the shape of a pyramid. Luo Nan suddenly sensed that something was wrong. He wanted to open his eyes, but then a shout came cutting in from the outside world. "Continue!" The voice was heavy, and it pressed down against Luo Nan's surging mind. Luo Nan's mind shook a few times before eventually maintaining the still state. By now, the image of mountains and rivers had blurred and faded away as a more familiar scene grew in its absence. It was a pyramid rotating in the void. Precisely speaking, it was the format pyramid, the visualization diagram. Luo Nan was rather bewildered by the sudden change in imagery. His perception toward his physical body was also affected, turning chaotic. But this situation did not last long. The chaotic information was absorbed by the rotating visualization diagram within Luo Nan's still state of mind. It was neat and orderly, structured with rules, and it seemed to be the central axis. A single action spurred the bones, flesh, and even the hundreds of millions of veins. An action spurred 100 actions, 1,000 actions, 10,000 actions. It possessed rules and was not the slightest bit disorderly. Luo Nan was familiar with this sensation. He went through the archetype format guide program in the complete version of the Frost River Waterway system back in Frost River reality. He ignited the virtual form of the format of fire. The format of fire had acted as an axis as well. It had many connections in many directions. It was vaguely the same as his current experience. The format of fire and the image of mountains and rivers were great, but they could not compare in meaning to the visualization diagram. Luo Nan had become accustomed to the continued existence of the visualization diagram by his side. The visualization diagram was the representation of formatting theory, the truth that Luo Nan revered. Therefore, the visualization diagram occupied the most central location in his mind when it appeared. His other feelings just surged and fluctuated around the visualization diagram, and they might as well be annihilated to dust. Luckily, Luo Nan was able to recall what his goals were tonight. Though he had somewhat deviated from his main task, the roots for the breathing technique still existed. His breathing tempo was only chaotic for just a moment before returning to calmness. The image of the mountains and rivers already turned blurry by now, but Luo Nan could still feel the circulation and accumulation of vital energy. However, the trending path naturally disappeared without a trace. Only layers of rising steam were left, amassing together in a steady stream. They rose toward the central region of the visualization diagram and toward the inscribed sphere. Luo Nan's visualization seemed to only be concerned with his body. The inscribed sphere contained his inner organs and the circulation of his blood and energy. Luo Nan's vital energy symbolized the activation of his body's functions, as lectured by Zhu Shenyu. As for what the convergence of vital energy represented, Zhu Shenyu did not say. The visualization diagram rotated endlessly, and at the same time, layers upon layers of vital energy poured inside. The energy was great, and it seemed that a change was about to occur. But there were no changes. The center of the inscribed sphere was just nothingness, like a black hole. No matter how much vital energy was amassed, it was all swallowed by this sheet of nothingness. Its limits could not be seen. At this time, Luo Nan's mind followed the circulation of vital energy and entered the inscribed sphere. This was the first time he did this since he started studying formatting theory. His actions came automatically to him. Clearly, he was making great progress in visualization. Originally, this was a good thing, but Luo Nan's mind became stiff and sluggish when observing the scene from the inside. He was flooded with darkness, which he did not know was real or not, and it was hard for him to feel anything else. Luo Nan's current state of mind was absolutely unsuitable for entering a meditative state. Then a deep cry came from outside. The cry suppressed the large upheaval that made Luo Nan leave his still state of mind. The cry pressed Luo Nan's mind firmly in this space, and it allowed Luo Nan to see things more clearly. Rattle, rattle. Within the abyssal space whose depth could not be seen, countless thick chains penetrated the sheet of darkness. They crossed and weaved. They coiled around each other. They formed a structure so complicated that it made one's scalp feel like it was about to explode. It was like an inescapable net. It was like a dungeon. That's right. The dark chains always came from the inscribed sphere of the visualization diagram. However, Luo Nan never thought that these seemingly endless chains, which could penetrate through layers of the void, could have this appearance, could have this shape, deeply hidden within the visualization diagram. Luo Nan had felt his vital energy boil with great power, but now it was simply negligible vapor in the face of such a cavernous chasm. The enormous pressure pressed down upon the spiraling strands of vital energy. A bit of light from a flame could be seen deep within the area of weaving chains. The light passed through the small chinks in the chains, but Luo Nan could not sense the slightest bit of heat from this light. The glacial chains sucked in what heat there was, leaving only a flicker of light behind. The light attracted a portion of Luo Nan's mind, and it seemed neither close nor distant. My heart's a prison. Suddenly, Luo Nan recalled the leading words in the 20-word secret mantra left behind by his grandfather. The rattle reverberated once more, and Luo Nan was no longer able to control his mind. He was expelled from the still state of mind, and the image of mountains and rivers, the image of the visualization diagram, all faded away without a trace. Luo Nan felt a burning heat in his lower abdominals, and nothing more. Luo Nan blinked with vacant eyes. The first thing he saw was Zhu Shenyu. Zhu Lei was next to the gym master. He opened his mouth but was tongue-tied. It took a while before he said, "You, how did you sit up?" Chapter 145. Start with the Body, Part 1-2. Translator, Strivon. Sit up, yeah, he did sit up. He sat in the lotus position, looking like a pyramid. He completely lost the image of the mountains and rivers imparted upon him by Zhu Shenyu. Luo Nan gaped with his mouth, speechless. Somehow Zhu Shenyu wasn't that surprised. He sized Luo Nan up and down a few times, then slowly said, "The breathing technique, taking old and new techniques and fusing them into a furnace. This is a good thing." Zhu Lei let out a breath of relief. Then that's good. He never expected Zhu Shenyu's next words to be, "It is also a pity that the art cannot be used upon his own body." What? Zhu Lei blinked. He was unable to translate the gym master's words. Zhu Lei looked at Luo Nan, whose head was lowered in deep thought, and saw no reaction from him. In the end, Zhu Lei could only ask, "Gym Master, sir, what do you mean?" Zhu Shenyu did not respond to Zhu Lei. He gazed at Luo Nan for a moment, then said, "I taught you to visualize the image of the mountains and rivers, but you were unable to bring about the mountains and rivers. The frozen ground, the icy waters through the crevasses. Most of it has been frozen. Water lubricates things, whereas ice brings one pressure." Luo Nan pondered over Zhu Shenyu's words. After a while, he raised his head and said, "I ask the gym master for guidance." Zhu Lei looked at the gym master. Then he looked at Luo Nan. He ultimately confirmed that he was out of a translating job. He shirked back to a corner and stopped saying anything, but his ears straightened in attention. Zhu Shenyu thought as he spoke. Just like Rome wasn't built in a day, 3 feet of ice does not form in a single day. I don't quite understand your visualization technique, but I can vaguely feel things from it. From the inside to the outside, your technique is strict and rigid, but is also grand and imposing. It is enchanting. And this, of course, is an excellent thing. Unfortunately, this glacial mountain isn't truly yours. The higher this glacial mountain is amassed, the grander and vaster it is, but at the same time, the smaller and more indistinct you become. As a man absorbs this power, the power also absorbs the man. This is your problem. Gym Master Xiu was never one who was good at words. He was not quite clear in his train of thought and in his way with words when he conversed with people. It was very laborious for one to hear his speech with its many metaphors and analogies. To the side, Zhu Lei's eyes were spinning in circles as he heard all this. Luckily, Luo Nan combined the gym master's words with his own understandings of his body and the prison in his mind, the interwoven dark chains, and was able to get a general understanding. As Luo Nan understood Zhu Shenyu, Luo Nan became seriously shocked by Zhu Shenyu's level of insight. He really respected Zhu Shenyu. This gym master undoubtedly had true skill. However, Luo Nan gained an even deeper loss now when it came to his own situation. It took a while before Luo Nan could ask, "Why isn't it mine? I'm the one cultivating using it. Is it all truly you?" This response stupefied Luo Nan completely. From the very beginning, the road he walked as he researched formatting theory was a road that required he rely on external forces. Psychotropic drugs, darksider life forms, sacrificial frames. The decisive application of these external things was the driving force behind the leaps and bounds of growth of his soul's strength. The only thing Luo Nan did was erect the frame, and even the frame was something he learned from his grandfather. Zhu Shenyu slowly stood up while Luo Nan was in his daze. He walked inside, next to the Tai Kai ball. There was not much lighting in the room, and the distance was far. All one could see was a fuzzy silhouette. Luo Nan and Zhu Lei glanced at each other. They both got up and walked over. Zhu Shenyu disregarded the two. He simply played with the Tai Kai ball, causing the bowl tray on the ground to swivel. The metal ball was half a man tall and was over 100 kilograms in weight. It began to rotate with noticeable noise. The rolling created a reverberating sound, and the cork floor was trembling. "This is the glacial mountain." Luo Nan nodded. He had automatically substituted the words glacial mountain for formatting theory in his mind. "This is you right now." Zhu Shenyu pointed at the bowl tray below as he spoke. The bowl tray was oscillating without end due to the heavy rotating sphere above it. Luo Nan was unable to take his eyes off it as he stared and juxtaposed his own situation with the bowl tray. This analogy was very intuitive. Even Zhu Lei, who was confused all this time, could understand. "Gym Master, do you mean that Nanster is cultivating far too quickly? A large tail obstructs action. Nanster's too lopsided, making it bad for him." He never expected Zhu Shenyu to shake his head. "He's being rejected." "Huh?" Zhu Lei was immediately stupefied once more. Then Luo Nan suddenly raised his head. Zhu Shenyu pressed his hand against the lines on the surface of the metal sphere, and the grinding and rotating metal sphere rumbled to a stop. Zhu Shenyu opened the outer shell of the sphere while it was still slightly swaying. He took out the complicated mechanism installed within its cavity. "You should be this." Xiu Shenyu spoke calmly. "To put it briefly, man and cultivation is like drawing a circle, with the self in the center of the circle. Then the circle is enlarged layer by layer. The range of control grows greater and greater, and its volume grows heavier and heavier. But no matter what happens, no matter where a man's heart takes him, the journey must be one without hindrance. Follow and oppose according to your heart. This is the true path. If the journey is heavy, sluggish, and cumbersome, if it's hard to propel down one's path, then this is what's called a large tail that obstructs action." Luo Nan first looked at the mechanical device and sunk into contemplation. Then he looked at Xiu Shenyu. "Then, right now you're just a support, a medium." Xiu Shenyu placed the mechanical device back inside the cavity. Then he made the metal sphere rotate again. "I assume that you, yourself, know clearly just how much strength you have left in the center of the circle." Luo Nan thought back to the depths of the inscribed sphere. There was that little light of flame that lacked all heat whatsoever. He took a deep, deep breath and said, "But I'm still there inside." "Just a portion," Xiu Shenyu responded dully. "This isn't your technique. You just endlessly watered it, and then it turned into layers of ice chunks. You let it expand, you let it become denser. You may be able to borrow its strength, but the strength has to follow its existing rules. You can't escape its constraints by even a smidgen. I haven't seen any substance that allows information to be fed back to the human body. There are mystic and incorporeal powers when it comes to a person's cultivation. But for you, this is just a pavilion in the air, a mirage. You've built it to such a scale that what is real and what is false are flipped upside down. This is the main reason behind the imbalance between your body and soul." Luo Nan instinctively disagreed with the first part of Xiu Shenyu's description, but everything changed when Xiu Shenyu mentioned how the strength has to follow its existing rules. Luo Nan was stupefied on the spot, as if he were hit by lightning. The doubts that had formed during the trip here on the public transport vehicle were vaporized by the luminosity of an epiphanic lightning bolt. That's right, why didn't he think of it before? Sensing the Star River, receiving feedback from his believers. These were all real and true achievements. They were all changes involving the mental plane, and they all existed within the frame of formatting theory. In contrast, Luo Nan had entered the rules set by President Yang Chen when he entered the simulator layer of the psychic wave network. While controlling the tiny paper men involved the material plane. These were fields that formatting theory could not access. Luo Nan found his powers effective in one aspect, but ineffective in another. This was the reason for it. It all lay here. Although this was just the view of a single person, Xiu Shenyu did not know of the concrete details involving formatting theory. He also was not aware of Luo Nan's awkward situation. The fact that Xiu Shenyu was able to deduce Luo Nan's situation to obtain an accurate assessment that was indistinguishable from reality was something that could not be described as coincidence. Luo Nan just stood there in his stupefaction. The darkness of the training grounds wrapped around him, as the sound of the metal sphere rolling came grinding into his heart. Xiu Shenyu's voice seeped in like fine sand. When we take in external powers, the first harm can be described as imprisonment. The next harm can be called inversion. The worst harm is parasitism. Your current situation is between imprisonment and inversion. Gym Master This was the first time Luo Nan interrupted Zhu Shenyu since tonight's studies had started. He stared at Zhu Shenyu with fixed eyes. He gazed directly into the sunken eye sockets of this decrepit middle-aged man. Depth, remoteness, and darkness lurked within there, and it was hard to distinguish between colors. Yet there existed a heavy force that pressed onto Luo Nan's heart. Luo Nan gritted his teeth and spoke. "Gym Master, do you mean that there are flaws with the technique I cultivate in? Is that correct?" Zhu Shenyu's response was the clearest Luo Nan ever heard from him. "Without a doubt. That's a wrap for this installment. Thank you all for watching and supporting Lord of the Stories. If you enjoyed this tale, please hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more amazing stories. You can also explore other series updated daily in our playlists. Have a fantastic day and see you in the next episode.